Hi, I'm Greg Dell, joined by attorneys Stephen Jessup and Cesar Gavidia. And guys, today I want to talk about more a general topic of disability denial reasons. We get tons of calls every day, thousands every month, and we hear every excuse that a disability insurance company has for denying a claim, but kind of like to talk about the top ones, the top 5, the top 6 or 7 that come to mind as we have this discussion. So, and it applies kind of universally to all of the companies because they're all kind of using their own nuances, but the same techniques because they usually all have very similar policy language, at least in the initial stages. Although, as you know, claims can be denied at any stage. It can be denied from the inception. It can be denied 3 months later. It can be denied. We've had clients 20 years they're on claim and they get denied, and then it's everywhere in the middle. So, Stephen, I'll come to you first to talk about what do you think is the most popular reason that disability insurance companies deny claims?
If I think about, just my time doing them and seeing denial letters, I think one of the biggest opportunities that they do it is a transition and definition of disability. Most policies will cover generally 24 months initially for your own occupation. Then after that, this idea of can you do some other type of occupation, based upon your training, education, experience. So I think if I really think about what's the most common time to deny, that's what we see a lot of when they go through that transitionary period.
And a lot of people think of disability like they know they have disability insurance through work, or of course, if they bought their own policy, those people know a lot. But the majority of the claims are these group employer provided policies. But a lot of people think of disability as Social Security disability. And they think in the beginning maybe that means if I can't do any work, that I have to be able to not do anything whatsoever. But these policies that we handle, that people contact us for, whether it's short-term disability or long-term disability, always start off with an own occupation definition of disability. And Cesar, what does that really mean, the own occupation definition of disability?
Yeah, so look, that's a very common term or definition that you see in many of these disability insurance policies. But at least in terms of the group cases, the employee benefit policies in particular, that is not, it shouldn't be confused by the employer or the insured as their job, because it's not necessarily their job or how they're performing their job for that particular employer. It's really quite broadly defined, okay, by the insurance company. It's usually how that occupation is performed or done on a broader scale, on the national economy scale, or on kind of a local market scale. But the point is that it's not specific usually to your job and how you're performing it for a particular employer. So for example, if someone is working in a sales position, and in their particular position, they have to travel all over the country, all right? And they're traveling by plane, or if they're in a particular zone or district that they have to travel maybe hours by car. But in many sales positions, that's not necessarily a substantial and material duty of that occupation or of that kind of role on a more broad or global scale. So they may not see that particular requirement of your job, having to travel, having to, carry luggage or suitcases, or having to really sustain the ability to get from point A to point B in a car and drive. That may not be something that they're looking at as far as being a substantial and material aspect or part of your occupation.
Now, what if that, in your example, what if that employer has a job description which says travel 2 times a week, but yet the national definition of how that job's performed in the economy from the disability company says, no, we don't see travel being part of that position. What do you do in that situation?
Well, you've always said the ERISA, particularly the group disability landscape, is like the wild, wild west, right? So that may differ from insurer to insurer, policy to policy. One insurer may say, okay, yeah, we could see, because this is how your employers provide us with this description of your occupation and of your job roles and of these really essential aspects of the way that you perform your occupation. We're going to consider that as part of a substantial material, aspect of your occupation or duty of your occupation. But if that's the only thing you're not able to do, and you're able to do all the other things, they may still find some way to say you're not eligible for benefits, right? So if that part is set aside and they say, okay, we can accept that you can't engage in this travel, but Your employer is offering this accommodation by perhaps meeting with the clients by video or doing something different that really kind of changes things for you, but it doesn't qualify you in terms of disability for these benefits or eliminate you from essentially being able to perform your occupation and do your job functions.
So, Stephen, it's supposed to be easier to get approved if you're unable to do the duties of your own occupation, whether that's the way the employer defines it or how it is in the national economy. But that's another thing that we always have to deal with, because people think, hey, this is my job, this is what I can't do. And then the disability company goes, not so fast. Yeah. This is your job. We're going to tell you what your job is. You're not going to tell us what your job is, which is unfortunate, but something we're prepared to always deal with. But then you talked about your number one reason for denial is that then you get to any occupation. But how does someone say, what do you mean any occupation? So I can go, people say I can flip burgers, I can work at Subway. What does that really mean?
Yeah, so any occupation, I think that also gets confused with Social Security's view of any occupation. I call Social Security the warm body standard. If you can do anything, that's work for them generally. Any occupation under the employer provided policies, it's always going to have something along the lines of, any occupation or gainful occupation based upon training, education, and experience. And then some policies will qualify that more and say, has to also pay you, 60% of your index pre-disability earnings. So there's an income component to it. So it's not necessarily this idea of flipping burgers, greeting people at Walmart where people say, are they going to make me do this? But even then, sometimes you see these denial letters and these occupations that they come up with, you're like, well, what the heck is this, right? So there's always this weird interplay between where their vocational expert at the insurance company is looking at, what you've done. And that's why people always ask, why are they asking me on these forms when I'm on claim about, my job history and skills? I'm like, right. They're setting you up for that change in any occupation definition. So, what the vocational expert at the insurance company is going to derive is what they think you have transferable skills to do, and that those jobs exist in the economy, right? That can get nuanced too, because sometimes it's like, does it exist in a local economy for someone who's in a relatively remote area versus someone in a metropolitan area? So the any occupation stage is one of the harder to fight. Going back to Caesar's Wild West, idea here. That's like, it's a free-for-all sometimes. The jobs that they come up with, and then sometimes they even go back to say, hey, we even think you can do your own job, especially if they can't find a job that has to meet an income component. Or you have situations where an insurance company will approve for your own occupation, which is sedentary in nature. And then they come back and they say, well, you can't do your own sedentary job, but you can do some other sedentary job, right? Now, yes, there's more things that go into work than just the physical abilities of it, but the insurance companies always dumb down vocational analysis to the physical requirements of the job. So there's a lot of this confusion, I think, for people of how can they say I can't do what I was doing, but I can do this job that's just like it, and nothing's changed with me medically.
And you touched upon something that I want Caesar to address, because I know this drives us crazy every time we get a denial letter from almost every company. They say, we believe you can do a sedentary job. What does that mean, Caesar, and why does that drive us insane every time we see that?
If you think about it, there are probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of jobs that are sedentary. In other words, it requires basically maintaining a sedentary or sitting type of position. It doesn't really require a substantial amount of physicality or lifting or walking, or when you think in terms of more laborious type of job. But that's also kind of a range and a spectrum, right? And part of the fallacy of this whole focus on sedentary is the fact that most occupations that are sedentary require a great amount of intellect, of processing, of executive function, of an analytical function. And in a lot of these claims and cases, claimants going out claiming disability or saying that they're struggling to perform their occupation, or a gainful occupation because they have issues relating to some sort of cognitive issue or memory issue or attention or concentration issue or a pain issue that could affect those things, because pain, even if it, from physical pain, can cause a great deal of cognitive impact, right? ability to focus and concentrate and really kind of the distractibility of it all.
Well, you know, I don't know the stats on this. Maybe you guys know, but of all the jobs of the working Americans here who have jobs, what percentage of those jobs are sedentary? I'm speculating. I'm willing to bet it's like 75%.
I would have to say probably 75%. And I usually say, because I've seen it even for lawyers, the denial you can do sedentary work. My counter to that is if being a lawyer, arguing back or a CPA or anything like that is as simple as sitting here for 6 hours and lifting 10 pounds occasionally, my life would be a heck of a lot easier, right? Work would be easy. So if you strip it down to it, you're basically saying anyone who can sit for 6 hours and lift 10 pounds could act as a lawyer or a CPA, something like that.
Well, that's what drives me crazy about that every time they say that. And then I think about, every now and then if I have a headache or I strain my back or I strain my neck or whatever, and I go to sit at the computer and do my job, and every 10 minutes I'm like, this is uncomfortable. And then what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about how uncomfortable I am, not the work, not the person who's calling me, not the next person who's walking in my office, not the 15, 20 things that are on my desk to do like everyone else does, and I can't get my work done. So I say that to the appeals examiner. I say, as you're reviewing this appeal, think about right now if you were in pain or discomfort. Would you be focused on even reading this document? Because your job, appeals examiner or disability insurance claim rep, is to be sedentary. You don't have to lift a lot of things. You don't have to walk. You don't have to stand all day long. You're basically at your desk. You're reviewing files and determining eligibility for people. So now think about the times that you're uncomfortable. Now transfer that over to a client who says, I'm uncomfortable for even 4 hours out of the day. But yet we know when you get into this, which we didn't touch upon, but this Department of Labor definition of sedentary, I believe it is sit for at least 6 hours a day with reasonable continuity. That means you work an 8-hour day. You got to be in your desk, focusing, concentrating for 6 out of 8 hours a day. And that's something that might be taken for granted, but that's not an easy task to do. And then Caesar, also like you were saying, well, what about your training? What about the thought process that goes into that? So I hate that they just dumb it down to this nothing thing. Like you hit the nail on the head. You just sit there in the chair and that's what you do. So these are just a few of the basic reasons we touched on. We have many other videos where we talk about the denial reasons, but this was one of the big ones that leads into, that change of definition and what is your occupation. And those are fundamental things that people really need to understand. So if you're someone out there who has a short-term or long-term disability claim, feel free to reach out to Caesar, Stephen, myself. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you, and we look forward to speaking with you.